Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. For today's video, we are going to be mapping out Ethereum. The coming Ethereum ETF is going to go live this month, and we are seeing Ethereum breaking out against Bitcoin for the first time in 2 years. The last time that this happened, Ethereum went from just $350 all the way up to $4,000, and I think that with the Ethereum ETF approval, with this going live, we are going to see the biggest altcoin run of our entire cycle, and all of the charts are perfectly lining up for this. This is going to be the most life-changing cycle for not only Bitcoin investors, but for altcoin holders as a whole, and I'm going to be breaking down all of my favorite charts that are most important so that we can be prepared and positioned to capitalize on any of the momentum ahead. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are to start off today's video, and we're going to be mapping out Ethereum because of the fact the ETF is coming this month for Ethereum. It will finally be released, and then once that goes live, I'm expecting a lot of money to be rotating back into not only Ethereum, but many of the on-chain altcoins as a whole. The reason we're going to be looking at Ethereum is because Ethereum has done something for the first time in over 2 years. It perfectly lines up with us having that rotation into the altcoins, and with this being the latter end of the cycle, the latter half I should say, before the real altcoin upside sets in, I really think that we're seeing all of the early stages of that big rotation setting in real time. So with that being said, guys, we're going to be jumping into this. I'm going to be breaking down some of my favorite charts in the market, the ones that I think are most important for really dictating what's going to happen around this big rotation from Bitcoin profits into altcoins, and then what it's going to look like through Ethereum, because Ethereum is going to be the driver of value. It always has been, and I really think that it always will be inside of the altcoin market. Now, as you guys know, when we had the ETF approved, when we got the ETF approval, we saw this big breakout at the upside. We've pretty much fully retraced that move. When we jump into the shorter time frames, we're kind of stuck in between a couple different levels. We haven't really got any confirmation one way or another. Now, our main resistance is going to be up here. We haven't even got close to that. We're still trending below that. We did technically break out of a shorter descending resistance, indicated right down in here. But, nonetheless, we're still consolidating below horizontal resistance, right? 3,500 is horizontal resistance right there. We tagged that level and pulled back. Yes, we are outside of this short-term descending resistance, but as long as we're still below horizontal resistance, then this thing could come back down and we could still see consolidation before we ever get back up to the point of retesting the descending resistance or even breaking out of the horizontal resistance right here. Horizontal resistance is at 35, so even if we came back down, as long as we can get back above this $3,500 level, we can reclaim and make our first higher high. I do believe that that sets us up for a breakout of the main descending resistance, which is going to be around $3,600. Pull back off of that level, and then from there, we're going to be looking at an entire trend reversal. So I think a lot of this consolidation is really just going to be impacted around the news around this ETF, because we're at this point where we're getting very, very close to this ETF approval. Now, the ETF is already approved, but it's going to be released here sometime in this month. So we just finally got to July 1st. There's been talks about July 2nd actually being that day for when this thing goes live. But, I just read this article today that said the spot Ethereum ETF launch delayed by the SEC comments. And if we come down in here, this man asks, "Good afternoon, sir. Is there a start trading of the ETH ETF confirmed for July 2nd? And then he says, "Unfortunately, think we're going to have to push back our over and under till after holiday." Sounds like the SEC took extra time to get back to people this week. Although, again, very little tweaks. And from what I hear, next week is dead because holiday equals June 8th. The process resumes, and soon after that, they'll launch. So what we're looking at here is still just further consolidation. I'm not really expecting a lot from Ethereum until we get closer towards that ETF going live. But once that ETF goes live, I'm really confident we're going to see a lot of new money actually coming into Ethereum as a whole. And we needed to zoom out and take a look at the big picture perspective, because I think that now is a very important time when we're looking at not only this cycle, but wrapping up and looking into our prior cycles for when that rotation actually took place. When did people take profit on Bitcoin? How high was Bitcoin into price discovery? Where were the altcoins at during that period? And then when did that rotation actually take place? Because I think that now is such an important time for our cycle. When we're looking at Ethereum and we're comparing each of the last two, Ethereum had a lot more of a slower cycle. You know, from peak low to peak low, it was like 450 days. And then from peak low to the point of us actually breaking out of our bear market bottom and flipping that as new support, it was about 650 days. So we spent a significant amount of time consolidating here, and it wasn't until, you know, pretty much right over in this period that the Bitcoin dominance finally topped and the altcoins started to actually outperform. So we saw Bitcoin make a pretty decent move. If we come over here, we can actually compare the two charts and see exactly when that rotation took place. So if we move this to a log scale, line it up with our resistance, we can see that this was the exact high in our last cycle before we got our topping in the Bitcoin dominance, and this was our alt season. Now, if you guys notice here, the Bitcoin dominance actually topped up here at 73, almost 74%. And it was inside of this candle right here that took place. From the prior all-time highs to where we were at, you know, you're looking at like a 50 to a 60%. We were looking at 50 to 60% still below those prior all-time highs once that rotation took place. So what we saw was once that topped right here, we tagged that descending resistance. That was where the big drop took place, and that was where altcoins went into their massive move into new all-time highs. Now, altcoins still ended up going for another new all-time high, but it was only after Bitcoin dominance had kind of already bottomed back down in here, and we weren't ever breaking back below that 38% region. So as it stands, the majority of our cycle, or what I should say, all of our cycle for the altcoins took place within this small little move, right? It was from basically December 2020 until May 2021. We didn't have nearly the same amount of rotation. It wasn't the same size of rotation, and it wasn't as big of a rotation as prior cycles. We only had about 138 days where the altcoins outperformed Bitcoin, right? So that was where things were a little bit different. Now, if we remove those drawing tools and we come to where we're at today, you know, we're pretty much looking at a lot of the same things. Bitcoin dominance is now sitting right at that major descending resistance. We have what looks to be an absolutely massive descending triangle forming in here on the long-term basis of the Bitcoin dominance. And so with us sitting right here back at that downtrending resistance, now is where I believe that rotation is going to take place. And I find it interesting that when we're looking at the last cycle, Ethereum had just broken out of its bear market bottom, flipped it as new support, and we had just broken out and made another new high above that, right? So we were basically right here at that point for that rotation to take place inside of Ethereum. Now, if we're comparing where we're at today, we're at a very interesting point. We're not that far off from that same cycle where all we've done is break out from this bear market bottom, right? We had this entire consolidation that we were at. It wasn't as long as the last cycle, but it was pretty close. You know, 500 days was right on par with the 450 days that we spent from peak low to peak low. So it wasn't that far off. You know, the cycles are still pretty much following the same time frames. And even though the price action itself might vary, we can see that we still follow the same amount of time inside of the bear market bottom. So for us to be breaking out, making this big move, ETH is already sitting around those prior all-time highs of the last cycle. We're looking at BTC dominance right here at that topping point, that shifting point for where we're expecting to see this drop and come all the way back down to this low end support at 40%. I do believe that we're seeing a lot of the same parallels that are showing that rotation is about to be taking place very soon. Now, I do believe that the fundamental driver of this is ultimately going to be the Ethereum launch of the ETF. So whenever that happens, I do think that that's going to be the big shifting point for when we're going to see Ethereum start to outperform Bitcoin and when that next leg up is going to be taking place. Because we can come over here and look at the ETH BTC pair, and we're at a very important point in this structure. And I think that we're moments away from getting that next big breakout. And if this is breaking out, we got to understand that this means it's outperforming Bitcoin as a whole. So if we're looking at this, Ethereum has been downtrending, right? Let's go to the long-term chart. Let's zoom out so you guys see the entire price history of what we're working with here. Ethereum has been downtrending over this entire couple year period. I don't think it's been a full 2 years, but it's been close. From the peak to where we're at right now, it's been 665 days. So we've spent a significant period of time maintaining lower lows and lower highs. We've had a number of different reactions on this descending resistance, depending on where you're drawing it. but every single time we hit it, we reject and make a lower low. For the first time in 2 years almost, this is the first time we've actually broken out, made a higher high, and have actually held that higher high. Now the question comes, are we going to continue to hold that? Are we going to maintain that? And I don't know for sure, but when we zoom in here on the shorter time frames, we're looking at a 3-day, we can see that this entire time we've been falling below once we've hit this level. Now, once the ETF got approved, we saw this big retest of this level. We rejected, pulled back, but all we did was retest this prior resistance as new support, reclaim that level, and make our first higher high. So we're still making a higher high, but we're technically, not fully out of the clear of our downtrending resistance. But if you guys notice, we're technically right on that same threshold. So the question comes, are we going to be holding this right here? Is the market actually going to confirm this breakout in ETH? And the big thing is, if this is the case and we are experiencing the first breakout in 650 days, this is going to be that moment where the altcoin money is going to rotate, because the only time the altcoins outperform Bitcoin is whenever ETH BTC is outperforming, right? And this was something we didn't see a lot of in the last cycle. If we're looking and comparing to 2017, 2017's peak was all the way up here, 0.17 per Bitcoin. Now, our peak in the last cycle was 0.08. So we made a lower high in that last cycle. But when we're zooming out and looking at the long-term projection of the Bitcoin dominance, this is what gives me a lot of confidence that this will be the first cycle that ETH BTC goes into a new all-time high since 2017. And it's because on the long-term basis of this chart, we've only ever created lower lows and lower highs. Now, the real difference here is ever since 2018, we've maintained a horizontal support, right? This is a horizontal support over the course of, let's get our date tool, 1800 days approximately that we've been inside of this. But you guys got to realize that we also have a downtrending resistance. On our log scale, this is a downtrending resistance. So we have descending resistance and a horizontal support. That is your definition of a textbook descending triangle. So for us to be creating one of the bigger continuation patterns that exist, not only bullish but bearish, whatever way the pattern's forming, for us to be creating a massive bearish continuation pattern, and then for us to be right here at that main descending resistance once again, we can see that the RSI is getting absolutely hammered. Lower lows, lower highs, all the way through. Every time we hit this level, we reject. And it's looking like this is turning more and more into this rounded top type price action. So guys, what we really need to remember here is, if this truly is the topping point, even if we made one more fake out to tag that, if this is the true topping point, we're going to be looking at this market selling all the way back down to this main support. We're going to be going from like 56, 57% dominance all the way back down to like 38 to 40% in one move. Our entire last cycle was this. This was the only move that the altcoins got to outperform, because they only went from 73, 74% dominance down here to like 40%. There was only a 30% gap the altcoins had the chance to run. When we're looking at our long-term basis, altcoins only ran for 138 days. It was right here at the very end of 2020 until midsummer of 2021 that was the move that altcoins had. Bitcoin still outperformed even inside of that final move, because the Bitcoin dominance was still just holding support down in here, ranging. So when we're looking at all of these, we have a very real potential where this is going to be not only our last cycle all in one go, because this drop, for us to go from like 57% back down to 40, it's almost the same size of our last cycle. So what we're going to end up experiencing, we're going to have our first little altcoin run right here when we top and sell back down to support. We'll probably chop around here, maybe make a bounce. But once we break below this main support being like 40%, once we go into those new all-time lows, we're looking at an absolutely massive drop that's going to behave very similar to that 2017 type of sell-off. When the Bitcoin dominance topped in 2017, we went from 95, 96% all the way down to 35%. And we basically did that all in one big flush. Now, we've been consolidating ever since then, right? Since the very bottom to where we're at today, you're looking at like 2,400 days worth of consolidation in this triangle. So once this thing starts to break down, I think there's a lot of factors that are telling us that this will be our biggest cycle for altcoins, because when we're looking at just the first drop, just for us to come back down and retest this main support that we've been on, assuming we don't even break down from that, you're looking at a very big move in the altcoins, and it's basically 75% of our entire altcoin run of that last cycle. So if we're looking at, 75% of our altcoin run happening just in that first leg down, we kind of bottom down in here, and then we make a real breakdown to new all-time lows. It's the move into new all-time lows that I'm really leaning towards ETH BTC going into price discovery and us having that true alt season that we just haven't really seen. Because in the last cycle, guys, as somebody who's been around for these prior cycles, you know, this cycle was teeny tiny. I was here in the beginning of 2016, so I traded the entirety of that 2017 bull run. You could buy anything and it would go up. We didn't see the same similarities in that last cycle. It was narrative based. You had to know what you were buying, what you were investing in. You had to spot out and identify key sort of narratives before they played out if you wanted to be early to anything. In this cycle, it's not been so much that way. It's kind of been a hybrid between the two, because we have seen meme coins. We've seen a lot of funny money, you know, blowing up. In fact, meme coins have provided some of the biggest gains this cycle, which is why I made my yesterday's video about meme coins. This is something that we really haven't seen because we still have a lot of euphoria. We have a lot of people speculating on, you know, random altcoins that really have no long-term value proposition. But at the same time, we're also seeing, you know, many of these top altcoins on chain taking off. Like, you have to be early to the narratives. You have to identify which narratives are hot. And then with that, you know, we're kind of seeing a hybrid of both of these, where we do have a lot more buy support than ever before, a lot more euphoria, a lot more speculation. But at the same time, we haven't fully got to that rotation yet. It's been very lackluster up to this point because altcoins haven't done a whole lot. When we look at Ethereum, Ethereum is pretty much one of the only ones that have really outperformed for the most part, but even ETH hasn't really outperformed against Bitcoin. When we're looking at this, ETH has been downtrending for 2 years approximately. So if this is going to be our first breakout of this downtrending resistance right here, we're still just consolidating here. But if this is going to be the first time we're breaking out from this since that last cycle, I find it very likely that we're getting close to that rotation happening in the altcoins. And there's a lot of charts lining up with this. The Bitcoin dominance is the main thing that I watch for, because we know that if this is looking like a top, then altcoins as a whole are going to rotate, right? Bitcoin profit's going to rotate into those altcoins, and we're going to start to see those take off. You don't see this amount of bearish divergence inside of a chart that's, I mean, we've been consolidating here ever since we started bearish divergence. You know, it's almost a full year worth of bearish divergence that we've had inside of this consolidation. So I think it's very important that we're not fading that. We're understanding that the ETF approval for, or what I should say, the ETF goes live this month. Speculation is around where that is or when that is. Chances are that's going to be sometime mid this month. So if we're looking at mid this month being the ETF approval, we're looking at BTC dominance at a major topping point, massive bearish divergence, more bearish divergence than we've ever seen. This is literally a weekly time frame, guys. We're looking at ETH BTC sitting on top of descending resistance, and we're looking at ETH pretty much sitting right around here at these range highs in the same position that it was in that last cycle before we went into price discovery. This is going to be the biggest cycle ever for the altcoins, and Ethereum is the driver of value for those altcoin markets. If you're looking at Ethereum and seeing Ethereum starting to break out here on these shorter time frames, it's a very big indication that there's a bigger rotation taking place on the larger time frames. The macro is strong. Ethereum now has the ETF approval. Once that goes live, I think it's just a domino effect before all of the other altcoins like Solana, maybe Chainlink, maybe XRP, some of those other top ones that have been around for a long time. Those are going to be the ones that are also going to be getting those ETF approvals as well. And so that's going to be such a big driver of value for on-chain markets, as well as just, you know, the native chain assets themselves, being Ethereum, being XRP, being Chainlink, or Solana, any of those. We're looking at that rotation taking place. And so I wanted to give you this update because as I'm zooming out and looking at the long-term basis of crypto, we're kind of at that last moment of time before we get that next big move. Even if we consolidate here for a little bit longer, I'm expecting that this thing's going to be breaking out and sending it into a massive new all-time high. And one of our biggest closes that just happened, getting a little bit off topic on this one, one of our biggest closes that just happened was the quarterly close. So if we remove this, the quarterly of Bitcoin just closed and this entire thing was just a retest, right? That is not a bearish candle. Yes, we saw a pullback, but we closed way back below, above those range highs. So our quarterly close for Bitcoin was extremely bullish. If we're looking at a bullish quarterly close for Bitcoin, we're looking at the ETF approval and going live this month for Ethereum. Bitcoin dominance is topping. ETH is now breaking out of its downtrend against Bitcoin for the first time in 2 years. There's so many reasons to be bullish right now, and if you're bearish, there's no saving you. You're going to lose your money. You're going to miss out on the rotation, and that's just the way it goes, guys. We've already seen altcoins really start to outperform being meme coins. You can only imagine what's going to happen once the entirety of Ethereum, all of the other altcoin chains start outperforming, because it's going to be, alt season across the board on multiple different chains at once. Something we just haven't had the opportunity of trading in prior cycles. This is the only time we've had truly revolutionary technology, on-ramps, layer 2s where we can actually scale and onboard real user bases like base layer 2. They can bring on their entire centralized exchange user base. They just announced their new Coinbase Smart Wallet that connects all of their centralized exchange to these different on-chain cryptos. We're going to see an absolutely glorious cycle, guys, and it's got me excited because I see it in the charts. I'm positioned, I'm prepared, I'm buying, I'm never stop buying, I'm all in on the markets, and I'm excited to see what you guys are able to do with this next cycle too. So if you guys did find value, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. If you guys want to see anything I'm doing with my actual portfolio, you can sign up for my website linked below. From there, I'm going to post anything I'm buying, selling, trading over this cycle, NFTs, different DeFi opportunities, airdrops, anything I'm doing with my money, literally. On-chain altcoins are going to be huge. I don't hardly ever trade on centralized exchanges anymore. It's almost strictly to on-chain trading at this point. So if you guys want to be able to see which altcoins I'm accumulating, which ones I like going into this bull run, you got to join my website linked below. With that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.